What if modern America isn't broken? What if it's functioning exactly as designed? Every year, more laws, more regulations, more paperwork, more technology, more information. Yet somehow people feel more confused than ever. You fill out forms you didn't write. You sign documents you didn't draft. You agree to policies written in language designed to exhaust you before you finish the first paragraph. You buy property. You pay the property taxes. You live in neighborhoods governed by documents most people never read until there's a problem. And somewhere along the way, we accepted all of this as normal. But what if confusion isn't a side effect? What if confusion is a part of the architecture? Because here's what BWAN teaches. Before people internalized the hierarchy was written in advance. It was recorded, recognized, enforced, and institutionalized. Modern America was built through law before it was stabilized through culture. Let that sit for a moment. Because if that's true, understanding the law that built the structure tells us more than arguing about the culture that grew inside of it. So today we name the mechanism. Welcome back to Be Wise African Network, where we don't just talk about history, we decode systems because history tells you what happened. Systems tells you how it happened, who benefited, why it keeps repeating. My name is Loretta Simpson. They call me the Receipts Strategist. And BWAN exists for one reason and one reason only. And that is to move Black people from emotional reaction to structural understanding. Because once you see the blueprint, you stop mistaking the machine for an accident. Today's investigation has three critical layers. Layer one is how force became paperwork. Layer two is how paperwork organized people. And then layer three is how to read the mechanism wherever you find it. So by the end of this video, you won't just see the mess, you'll see the grid underneath it. Let's go. Every system has a beginning, but systems don't begin with paperwork. Paperwork comes later. They begin with power. History remembers the dramatic moments, the wars, expansion, treaties, conflict, and the political compromise. Those moments make the history books. But something much quieter happens afterwards. And that's the part nobody teaches. The force eventually disappears, the paperwork stays. Think about that. Governments cannot administer force forever. Eventually, force must become administration. Land must become records. Boundaries must become maps. And ownership must become documentation. Otherwise, nothing can be inherited. Nothing can be taxed. Nothing can be sold. And nothing can be governed. This is one of the most critical transitions in the American blueprint. The legal system took physical events and transformed them to administrative facts. Those facts are surveys, a deed, a title, a registry. Once it's paperwork, it's permanent. Not because history disappears, because institutions operate from records. Future generations inherit the documents, not the moment that created them. That is the move, that is the mechanism, the historical receipt. Let's make this concrete. In 1823, the Supreme Court decided Johnson versus McIntosh. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote the opinion. The ruling established that European discovery gave the federal government ultimate title to land. Indigenous peoples retained only occupancy rights. In 1823, the Supreme Court Justice decided Johnson versus McIntosh. It was Chief Justice John Marshall who wrote the opinion. The ruling established that European discovery gave the federal government ultimate title to land. Indigenous people retained only occupancy rights. People who lived on land for thousands of years were administratively reclassified as occupants, not owners. It was one court decision, one recorded opinion, and the entire foundation of American property law shifted. Banks relied on it, courts relied on it, title companies relied on it, and future buyers relied on it. The administrative record became the operating reality. That's why Dr. John Henry Clark spent decades telling us a people without the knowledge of their past origin and culture is like a tree without roots, because the system understood something our communities are still learning. Control the record, and you control the reality people inherit. Let's talk about the deed audit. Here's your first assignment. Go to your county's online records. Search your property address. And if you're not a property owner, just do a search for the place that you're renting. This is like an interactive experience. So when the deed comes up, don't just confirm your name or the owner's name. Look for 3 specific things. 1, the legal description. This is the official administrative identity of your land, not your address. It's the legal description. Number 2 is the chain of title. Who owned this property before you? Go back as far as the records allow. What you find may surprise you. And then number 3, restrictive covenants. Even if those covenants are legally enforceable today, read them. They are the ghost in the machine. They reveal how neighborhoods were originally organized, what assumptions shaped your property values, and what boundaries were drawn before most of us arrived. That is the first page of the blueprint. Don't let someone else read it for you. Before we move on to layer 2, here is your first community question. Have you ever looked at your property's original restrictive covenants or legal description? If so, what was the rule that surprised you most? The ghost in the machine nobody told you about. Drop it in the comments. We are building the archive together. Now let's talk about the classification. Now the blueprint makes its next move. First, it organized the land. Then it organized the people. Because a government can record every acre of land, but until it decides who belongs where, who owns what, and who accesses which rights, the blueprint remains incomplete. This is where classifications enters the story. And here's what most people miss. It begins as administration. The government asks questions: citizen or non citizen, adult or minor, owner or tenant, qualified or disqualified. One category leads to another, then another, then another. Eventually, those categories begin shaping opportunity itself. Here is the historical receipt. The Virginia slave codes passed between 1640 and 1705 didn't begin as hatred. They began as a labor problem. After Bacon's rebellion in 1676, poor Europeans and African laborers united against the ruling or the colonial ruling class. The elites recognized something dangerous. Class unity could not overthrow colonial power. So they engineered a solution. They passed laws that made African slavery lifelong and hereditary, gave poor Europeans legal status above laborers, banned interracial alliances, and then created a psychological loyalty to the ruling class through racial identity. The Pardon Statute of 1662 made slavery self-reproducing. A child's status followed the mother, meaning slavery became inherited property. No new wars required, no constant enforcement required. That's automation. Dr. Francis Cress Wiseling taught us that white supremacy functions as a system, not a collection of individual prejudices. This is exactly what she meant. The system didn't run on hate alone. It ran on incentive structures written into law. And here's the part that connects directly to your life today. The mechanisms never disappeared. Only the categories change. Bring that logic into your neighborhood. Most people think an HOA exists to enforce landscaping rules, paint colors, parking regulations, but underneath those visible responsibilities sit another administrative system. An HOA classifies. It approved, denied, violations, no violations, compliant, non compliant, good standing, or delinquent. It doesn't begin with you at all. It begins with the category assigned to you. The blueprint didn't stop with the governments. It extended into private systems created through law. And here is the receipt. Racially restrictive covenants, private deed restrictions, legally barred Black families from purchasing property in entire neighborhoods across America well into the 20th century. The Shelley versus Kramer Supreme Court decision in 1948 ruled those covenants judicially unenforceable. But the covenants remained in the deed. The wealth gaps those covenants produced remained in the data. The Federal Reserve reports that for Black families, the median household wealth stands at approximately about $44,900 compared with the $285,000 for European families or white families. That gap did not come from culture, it came from documents. Private constitution. If you live in an HOA, here's your assignment. Don't start with your board. Start with your state's enabling statute. Find the law that authorizes homeowners associations in your state. I need you to read it. Then you read your Declaration of Covenants. Read your bylaws, read your rules and regulations. This is referred to as your CCRs. Most homeowners spend years arguing with the board. Few spend an afternoon reading the architecture that gives the board its authority. So read the blueprint. See where the authority begins, then see where it ends. Because the board did not write that authority. A lawyer did, a developer did, a statute did. That's where the investigation starts. I have another question for you. When did you realize your neighborhood was a private legal system? Was it a letter, a fine, or something you found in your paperwork? Tell me the moment. I'm reading every reply as we prepare for August's deep dive into the HOA files. Your answer may end up in the investigation. So let's talk about the mechanisms, how to read the structure. Every system leaves a footprint. Once you know what you're looking for, they're surprisingly difficult to miss. Here's a common situation. A homeowner applies to install a fence. The request is denied. Most people immediately ask, why was I denied? That's the natural question. That's the wrong investigative question. The investigative question is, what mechanism produced the outcome? Did the blueprint produce it or did a person? There's a difference. The blueprint tells people what they are allowed to do. The mechanism explains how the decision was made. That's why investigators don't stop with the answer. They examine the process. Now, I want to ask you 3 questions. When you encounter an institutional decision, I need you to ask these 3 questions. Only 3 questions. Question 1, you're going to ask, who designed the category? Every decision fits inside of a category someone else created. Approved, denied, eligible, ineligible. Find out who wrote the category. Then you want to ask question number 2. What is the precedent? Has this mechanism produced the same outcome before? For whom, under what conditions? The precedents reveals the patterns, and the patterns will reveal the design. And here is question number 3. Where is the receipt? Every institutional decision leaves a paper trail, a meeting minute, a recorded vote, a written policy, a statute citation. 3 questions only. Who designed the category? What is the precedent? And where is the receipt? Systems become far easier to understand when you require them to explain themselves through their own records. That's how you move from reacting to investigating. Let's look at the bigger picture. Malcolm X said it directly. If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. The mechanism works the same way. If you focus only on the outcome, you miss the architecture that produced it. If you focus only on the personality, you miss the system that authorized the personality. So BWAN teaches one discipline above everything. My favorite part: name the mechanism. Don't name the emotion, not the personality, but the mechanism. Are you hearing me? Because once you name it, you can read it. Once you can read it, you can challenge it. Once you can challenge it, you can build something that works for your community instead. So let's go from victim to architect. Modern America did not simply emerge, it was built layer by layer, document by document, category by category. Today's investigation covered 3 layers. Layer 1: force becomes paperwork. Paperwork, let's find this paperwork. It is the force that becomes the paperwork. Paperwork becomes permanent. Future generations inherit documents, not the moment that created them. Layer 2 is that paperwork organizes people through classification. Classification shapes opportunity. The mechanism itself outlasts the law that originally created it. And layer 3 is this: every institutional decision carries a mechanism. 3 questions reveal it. And those questions are: who designed the category? What is the precedent? And where is the receipt? Here's what I want you to do for next week for me. I got a couple of assignments for you. Pull your property deed, find the legal description, read the chain of title, and then look for restrictive covenants. And assignment 2 is that if you live in an HOA, find your state's enabling statute, read your declaration of your covenants, locate where the board's authority begins and where it ends. And then the last assignment is this: the next time an institution delivers a decision that affects you, whether it's a loan, a permit, a denial, a policy, ask these 3 questions before you react. Who designed the category? What is the precedent? And where is the receipt? Black people have always been the most studied, the most surveyed, most classified population in American history. Our communities carry the right to understand every system that shaped our present. Harriet Tubman did not just escape, she read the landscape. She understood the systems well enough to move through it and bring others with her. That's the energy BWAN carries forward. Now that you have seen the national blueprint, we have to go deeper. In August, BWAN goes deep inside the HOA system. As you can see, we have HOA boards and systems all across America that is negatively impacting homeowners. So the same blueprint, the same mechanism operating in your own neighborhood, the architecture of your block. It is your board and the deed. Please subscribe now, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Drop in the comments, what mechanism have you personally encountered that you now see differently? Because the blueprint only stays hidden when people stop asking questions. You just started asking the curious and right questions. I'll see you in August, where we take the blueprint home. This is where we need to be right now and in this moment. It is time to bring clarity and decisiveness